You know that feeling when someone is looking at your resume and you can see them trying to figure out how all your experiences connect? Perhaps you even feel like they're making assumptions about you off of things other than your experience. Things like your age, or that you took a bit of a brief detour away from corporate life for a few years and now you want to come back to it. Or my personal favorite, that you're actually in the second half of your career, closer to retirement. So there couldn't be any way that you'd be up to the pace for the role that you just applied to. If any of these things resonate with you, you're exactly who I made this video for. Because what looks like a career story that has people scratching their heads and not quite getting it can actually be your biggest competitive edge if you know how to translate it. My name is Mary Despe de Echemendia, and I'm a career coach based here in the Honolulu area. I've helped hundreds of people with unconventional or nonlinear career and life stories attract, land, and thrive in what's next professionally. Many of my clients have seen success because we've been able to tell their professional narrative through storytelling that is clear and true to themselves and their experiences. They bring all this interesting life and work experience only to have it misunderstood by recruiters and others involved in the hiring process. So today we'll talk about a simple way to reframe your unconventional career story and turn it into a clear and compelling narrative that clicks. You know, I wanted to tell a quick story about the time I almost didn't become a recruiter, not because I couldn't do the job, because I didn't know how to tell my story in a way that made sense. You know, years ago, I was working in HR, but my very first job was actually in a call center as a benefits representative. Eventually, I'd moved over to the system side of HR, doing things like system implementation and working behind the scenes. But, you know, I had always known deep down I wanted to be more on the people side of the business, which involved recruiting, interviewing people, helping others navigate their own careers. So I had started applying for recruiting roles, and I'll never forget this one interview that I had with an owner of a staffing agency. We were chatting and he stopped me mid-sentence and said, you know, I see a really quiet introvert who wants to be a recruiter. I can see that you're smart, but you know, I just don't see you becoming it. And to be honest, I was really crushed by his feedback. But, you know, he wasn't wrong about me being quiet or introverted. But what he didn't understand, and what I didn't know how to explain at that time, was that I could do the work really well and do it in my way. You know, I had the listening skills, the analytical thinking, and the empathy that actually made me a great recruiter. I just couldn't communicate it clearly enough for him to see it. And that experience taught me something, you know, that having the skills isn't enough if you can't help people connect the dots to your story. So for some, my background was a little unconventional for a recruiter role. You know, they saw call center, they saw benefits, they saw systems. But the fact is that all of those experiences added up to something valuable. I just needed to learn how to frame it in a way so that others could see it too. And that's exactly what I want to help you today with in this video. So let me walk you through a simple two-step process to do this. So step one is to find the golden thread. And by this, you'll want to first start off by asking yourself this question. What's the one thing that you do better than almost anyone else you know? Because at the heart of it is your professional story. Sure, you might be able to do a lot of things well, but it's important to hone in on the one area where you set yourself apart from other people. It really speaks to how you bring your unique value to a workplace, to groups, or to a project. Having a sense of this will impact not only how you write your resume, but also how you talk about yourself in conversations like interviews, what examples that you share with a future employer, or when you're pitching an idea or networking with other people in the industry that you want to be in. So a lot of times clients have asked me, where do I even begin in starting to narrow it down? And there are a number of ways you can do this. A simple example is to just sit down, think about every job, every project and pivot that you've made, and then look at the actions or behaviors that have always come up. You might notice that there's a pattern that people come to you to help with a certain problem or a certain situation. For example, you might have a specific expertise on a software program that no one else has, or you have a way of approaching problem solving that is very different and effective. Okay, so reframe your story around impact, not the job title. So once you have your golden thread, you'll want to put it into this sentence. I help X with Y to do Z. I'll say it again. I help X with Y to do Z. So with this step, you're taking what you do better than anyone else so that it has a clearly articulated impact. This sentence does a few different things. One, it reframes what your golden thread is into a purpose of service. Two, it highlights who you're helping. And three, it tells us the kind of impact that you're having with that audience. So it simply tells what you do in a way that people can quickly understand. It also gives you the chance to communicate your story in a way that's slightly different than what everyone else usually goes to first. You're able to talk about your expertise in a way where you're not limiting yourself to the job title or even getting caught up in very predictable cliche ways to describe what you do. With this approach, you're avoiding those buzzwordy ways that a lot of people fall into when trying to sell their strengths. When I started working with Jenna, she was feeling completely stuck. She had spent her entire life as a professional ballerina. She'd trained, performed, toured internationally, and her whole identity was really built around dance. She wanted to transition into the business and nonprofit world. The problem was, every time someone looked at her resume, all they could see was performer. And that label really started to feel like a wall. She felt that recruiters just couldn't see beyond it, even though she'd actually done a lot more. Beyond performing, Jenna had actually a lot of business-oriented skills. She managed productions, coordinated international tours, designed marketing flyers, and even gaining sponsorships from organizations and individuals to help underwrite performances for her dance company. Everyone who would see her applying to these non-performing, non-dance roles kept putting her into this tiny box of being an artist. We used the golden thread approach. We were looking for that impact that she made, not just the work that she did. Her golden thread was this: I help mission-driven organizations modernize systems, simplify complex challenges, and create intuitive ways to get their work done effectively every time. And this was able to help her cut through the noise and get people who are outside of that world really understand how she could make a difference. It made her feel so much more confident, but it also helped in changing the way how other people saw her too. Once she started using that golden thread statement, she could finally communicate value in a way that employers outside of the dance world could understand immediately. Stories were framed in the language of impact and not performance. So Jenna ended up landing a really great job as an associate director in fundraising for a large mission-driven organization, even in this uncertain job market. The takeaway here is that your unconventional or nonlinear background doesn't have to work against you. You just have to find the thread that runs through it. Because when you do, people stop seeing where you came from and start seeing what you bring. Now, if you've ever felt like your background doesn't fit, drop a comment below and tell me what worlds you've lived in. I might feature your story in a future video and help you find your golden thread. And if you want to hear more stories like Jenna's and find practical ways to reframe your experience, make sure that you hit subscribe. You've got more value than you think. It's just waiting to be translated.